Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and we've got your Week 8 waiver wire video to help you guys out with your NFL season. Unfortunately, there were a lot of injuries that have happened, and of course, there are no bye weeks this week, so there's some great players and really some great options for you this week, so make sure you guys are ready for it. All right, so we're jumping right into this. Week 8 of the NFL season is just about here, which means we've got another great Thursday game. We've obviously got some games on Sunday early morning, and then, of course, a great slate on the rest of Sunday and Monday. So with that said, no bye weeks at all, like I mentioned. There are no teams on a bye, which is great news, but unfortunately, there were a lot of injuries that happened over the weekend, and, you know, especially if you watched any of that Monday night game from the Bucs, devastating. There are a lot of injuries. So hopefully this video helps you guys out with some players that you should consider picking up for your team, whether you're in deeper leagues or maybe 2 quarterback leagues, full PPR, different types of formats. And of course, if you have questions, hit me up in the comments down below. Now I'm going to jump into the quarterback position first. As far as players that I think you should consider grabbing, the first player I'm going to mention is going to be Drake May for the Patriots versus the Jets this week. He's available in 84% of leagues, and I mentioned May last week on my waiver wire video, and I also mentioned him as a great start against the Jaguars, and he delivered. May is a great option to pick up if you're in a 2 quarterback league, or if you're, maybe dealing with poor quarterback play like Patrick Mahomes or Matthew Stafford. Like, these are type of things you have to make a decision for your fantasy team. He does have a tough matchup, though, against the Jets. The Jets are a pretty good defensive team, even though Russell Wilson just looked amazing against them. So I will say there's a little bit of hesitancy there. But if you are in a deeper league, or if you're a team that, again, dealing with injuries, or you're 2 quarterback, Drake May should already be picked up. The fact that he's available in 84% of leagues is still kind of crazy to me, because he's in the 2 starts he's had, he's averaging 20 points per game and throwing for 259 passing yards. So I really like Drake May a lot. Another quarterback you should consider grabbing this week is going to be Jameis Winston for the Browns. He's going against the Ravens this week, which is going to be a tough matchup. He's available in 99% of leagues, which is completely understandable because Deshaun Watson was the starter. Obviously, right now, Winston is the clear replacement for Deshaun after he went down and suffered a ruptured Achilles, which will affect him the rest of the season. With that said, Winston is going to get that starting role as of right now. The reason why I say that is there's a good chance they may not even start him. The Browns could easily go into a tank mode, and maybe they put some other players in there. We'll see how things play out. But as of right now, Jameis Winston is the starting quarterback for the Browns. I'm not saying he's an option you should go and just put all your fab in, or go crazy for. But the reason I mentioned Jameis Winston is a couple things. One, I do think he is worth a grab in deeper leagues or in 2 quarterback leagues, because you're going to need a quarterback that can do that. Now, with the change of Amari Cooper being gone and going to Buffalo, does affect how this plays out for Jameis Winston. But I do think this helps improve players like Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku. These are going to be things that I think actually plays a bigger factor for them. But you may want to consider grabbing Jameis Winston. Now, Russell Wilson is probably my number 1 waiver wire this week if you are in need of a quarterback. Russell Wilson's going against the Giants this week. He's available in 93% of leagues. And what a great way to come off of injury in his first start, really, for a new team in general. There were a lot of questions as to why Fields was benched for Wilson, especially after having a 4-2 record, especially where Wilson didn't look great in Denver. Wilson came out kind of sluggish in the game, but he came out very aggressive and drastically changed the way the Steelers offense completely was. Wilson had 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and he finished as QB3 in fantasy in week 7 with 24 points. He has a great matchup against the Giants, and then he goes on to a bye. But I still think Russell Wilson is absolutely worth a grab for sure, because again, there was a reason why they brought him in. There was a reason why they put him over Fields when he got healthy, and man, did that offense look great, especially against a really tough Jets defense. Now, the last quarterback I'm going to mention is a good grab. It's going to be Tua Tagovailoa versus the Cardinals this week. He's available in 54% of leagues. I understand kind of the hesitancy. People want to see how he plays coming out of this injury in the IR. He is obviously expected to play this week, and the concussion was definitely something that a lot of people thought maybe was going to be career-ending. Having Tua back, though, in the Dolphins offense is definitely welcomed by fans, definitely welcomed by fantasy football owners. And I don't expect him to be great right out of the gate, but I do think he's worth a stash, especially when bye weeks start really creeping up or other injuries or bad play, right? Tua wasn't great in week 1 and obviously got hurt in week 2. But Tua definitely is a big factor in this Dolphins offense. He should absolutely be considered grabbed this week. Now, jumping into the running back position, the first running back I'm going to put as a good waiver wire is going to be Tank Bigsby. Now, the likelihood of him being available is probably very low, but across the board right now, he's available still in 34% of leagues. And when given the opportunity, Bigsby has shown he can handle the rock. He can be a lead back. And really show up really, really well for the Jaguars. In the 2 games he was given the touches and opportunities, he scored over 23 points in each of those 2 games. And in his first start this year, he had 23 points with over 100 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. With Etienne possibly missing another game and just still dealing with injuries, Bigsby could absolutely be a solid running back 1 in weeks that Etienne is not there. Now, we'll see how things play out. There's a chance that maybe they trade away Etienne and Bigsby comes the back, right? Like, we don't know how this is going to play out. The trade deadline is still coming up, but I still think Bigsby being available in 34% of leagues is kind of crazy. He should be stashed for sure. Another running back I actually think should be considered a grab in a lot more leagues is going to be Alexander Mattison versus the Chiefs this week. He's available in 46% of leagues, and obviously I've never been the biggest fan of Alexander Mattison. If you watched any of my previous videos, I didn't think he was going to be a great fit replacing Aaron Jones before. And I just don't think Madison is really the answer. Right? Like, Madison is having his best fantasy season, though. He is averaging 12 points per game, putting him as a solid RB2 this season. And since essentially taking over the backfield from Zamir White, Madison has been averaging 54 rushing yards, 28 receiving yards, and 14 points per game. Now, White is still a factor in this backfield, but the Raiders have relied on Madison's athletic ability, his receiving ability. He's a good pass blocker, and the Raiders are typically playing behind most often, which puts Madison in situations where he can get about 3 to 4 receptions per game, which again, in a PPR, format, he's going to help you get to those double-digit performances. So 46% of rosters, he's available. You should consider grabbing him up. Now, the last running back is going to be more for deeper leagues and stashes. It's going to be Ray Davis for the Buffalo Bills. Now, they're playing the Seahawks this week, and he's available in 74% of leagues. Davis is a great handcuff to any James Cook owners. Or he's a great waiver wire add if you're in very deep leagues and you have the opportunity to grab him. Davis, in his first NFL start, he put up 18 points, had 97 rushing yards, and 3 receptions. He had 11 points last week, scoring a touchdown and relieving, Cook at times, which was something that may end up becoming more and more, prevalent into the season. There's a good chance that, if James Cook misses time or gets hurt, obviously Davis's value completely increases, but he's definitely a perfect back for anybody who's got James Cook, and again, a great back for deeper stashed leagues. Now, jumping into the wide receiver, this is probably going to be a long-winded list, and unfortunately, we dealt with a lot of injuries this past weekend. So hopefully one of these wide receivers are available. These are guys that I think should be. They're actually pretty high, and you may want to consider. Now, jumping to the first wide receiver I'm going to mention is going to be Ricky Pearsall for the 49ers. They're going against the Cowboys this week, and he's available in 87% of leagues. Now, I mentioned Persol first of the 49er receivers because of the draft capital and based off the depth chart. If he had not missed time due to the unfortunate shooting that had occurred, he would have been the third receiver behind Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, not Jauan Jennings. Now, Jennings played very, very well and should be the popular waiver wire add, which is why, again, I mentioned Persol because he's most likely going to be available or most likely the cheaper option when it comes to spending your fab money. With Deebo and Ayuk out, Persol could be a solid flex play going forward. Now, Deebo Samuel is dealing with pneumonia and had some liquid fluid in his lungs. We don't know how long he's going to be out. He will be back this season. It's unfortunate what's happened to him, but he should be back. Now, Brandon Ayuk obviously is going to be done for the season. So in the meantime, both Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings are great options to grab, especially if you're in a league that you're desperate at the wide receiver position. I know a lot of people have taken hits. Nico Collins, Mike Evans, or Godwin. The list is going on. So both of those options are really good. Now, Jauan Jennings is absolutely going to be the number one grab because of what he's been able to do for the 49ers. And he should be a priority. He's been successful this season, when given opportunity, Jennings is wide receiver 20 in fantasy points per game. He's averaging 13.9 points a game right now. And when he's given the chance, he had 46 points when he got the chance to start. Being that he's been on the team since 2021, he automatically becomes a favorite for Brock Purdy in this offense because he's got that rapport and obviously familiarity. Now, I think Persol could end up being the favorite eventually because I think his athletic ability, and again, they drafted him in the first round for a reason. I do think he ends up becoming the guy, but right now, if you're desperate and you need a wide receiver to start this week, Jauan Jennings is the one you want to grab off of waivers. Another receiver you may want to consider grabbing if you can't get any of those guys is going to be Romeo Doubs for the Green Bay Packers. They're playing the Jaguars this week, and like I mentioned, the Jaguars are a poor pass defense, and Doubs is available in 56% of leagues. Now, after Doubs' grump fest and obviously missing a game due to that, Doubs has actually played pretty well. He's averaged 18.6 points and could be wide receiver 2 on the Packers. Now, I do have hesitation with any Packers receiver, even Jaden Reed, who's had a successful season so far. The Packers don't really, I would say, call it a true wide receiver 1. Now, this was something that was talked about in offseason, and everyone kind of laughed about it and, well, why don't you have a wide receiver 1? This offense doesn't necessarily need one. Love has done a great job in getting all of the wide receivers involved and being able to spread the ball around. So, relying on a Green Bay Packer to be your wide receiver 1 or 2 can be a scary thing in fantasy. It could be a thing that could either win you a game or could you lose your game. I think most of these Packers wide receivers should be a flex play. But if you're going to need to grab a receiver because of injuries or things like that, Romeo Doubs is a good option. Sticking through the wide receivers, I've got Cedric Tillman for the Browns as a great option. Now, he's available in every single league right now, and he's going against the Ravens this week. Tillman instantly became a beneficiary of the Amari Cooper trade to Buffalo. With Jerry Jeudy now being moved to the wide receiver 1 slot, and Tillman and Elijah Moore both are obviously going to be the ones fighting for the targets behind him, I think this is actually a really good opportunity for Tillman. Tillman in his first game without Amari Cooper had 8 receptions, 81 yards on 12 targets. Again, he's going to be a nice little flex play. And with the quarterback change, with Winston coming in after Watson being hurt, I think actually improves both him and Jerry Jeudy. I do think it's going to improve a lot more in that passing aspect because Winston's always been known to throw the ball down the field. He's not afraid to do that. So I think he's definitely worth a grab in this one. Another receiver is Tyler Lockett for the Seattle Seahawks. He's going against the Buffalo Bills this week. He's available in 43% of leagues. Unfortunately, Metcalf was injured in week 7, and now Lockett's value absolutely increases. Now, we don't know how long Metcalf's going to be out, and we'll see how that plays out, but Lockett isn't having his best season so far, especially since, realistically, the emergence of Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. With the Seahawks being one of the heavier passing teams in the league, though, Lockett now being the wide receiver 2 again, even though I think he's been the wide receiver 2, absolutely sees plenty of targets this week. With Metcalf being out, and we'll see how long he really is out for. They haven't really kind of gotten into it so much, but Lockett becomes a benefactor of this offense, and he's got the familiarity with Geno Smith. Now, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba is definitely the way to go, but his availability is very little in leagues as far as waivers, so I didn't want to mention him because he's not going to be probably available in most leagues, but if he is, he's definitely a great grab. And the last wide receiver is going to be Jalen McMillan for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going against the Cardinals. He's available in 97% of leagues, and unfortunately, that was a really horrific Monday night game for the Tampa Bay Bucs. Losing Evans in the first quarter, re-aggravating his hamstring was definitely a factor, and it hurt a lot of folks. On that Monday night game, hurt Baker Mayfield. I think it definitely played a factor in that game. I think that's why they ended up losing. Even though I think the Ravens offense is obviously phenomenal, I think Bucs had the ability to keep up. But then you lose Chris Godwin with an ankle injury for the season at the end of the game. Now, I don't hate the call of keeping the starting offense out there. They were only down by 10. They had actually got an onside recovery. They had a chance, and you got to try to fight that. They still had some time. So it's just an unfortunate thing. But with losing Chris Godwin for the season, Mike Evans is probably going to be out 3 to 4 weeks, maybe even longer. That leaves rookie McMillan as a great option to fill in. Now, he's explosive. He could definitely be a factor in this offense. And I think he'll even benefit when Mike Evans comes back. I think McMillan obviously will see a lot less coverage. Now, also keep an eye on Sterling Shepard. He's definitely going to be another factor. I know people have talked about Trey Palmer, but I think Shepard becomes a great value as well, especially in deeper leagues. But as far as wide receivers for the Bucs, I'm going to Jalen McMillan. Now, jumping into the tight end position, the first tight end I'm going to mention is going to be Hunter Henry for the Patriots going against the Jets this week. He's available in 69% of leagues. Hunter Henry is currently tight end 6 for the season, right? Tight end 6, that's crazy. And he's averaging 9.2 points per game, and he's coming off a 9-catch game in week 7. With how the season is going for tight end position, he's definitely worth grabbing and putting on your roster. At this point, with May now being the starting quarterback, I think this is going to actually benefit Hunter Henry. I think it's going to be a benefit in targets, especially in, first down, middle of the play, maybe that scramble if May has to move out of the pocket. Henry is definitely going to be his safety valve. And also, I think he's going to be a red zone threat because, again, you're feeling comfortable. Most rookie quarterbacks tend to feel comfortable with their tight end as far as that sure-handedness. So I do think Hunter Henry's got some value there. Another tight end I really like is going to be Jonnu Smith for the Miami Dolphins. Going against the Arizona Cardinals, he's available in 96% of leagues. Jonnu will now have his quarterback this week, which is great news. He's coming off of 2 strong weeks where he saw an average of 7 targets his way and averaging 16.8 points a game. He will need to continue to see those same targets, though, to be a factor. Again, the tight end landscape's so weird. Jonnu Smith may actually end up being worth a stash and maybe even starting some weeks based off their matchups. But right now, people are still continually starting Sam Laporta, who is just Mr. Irrelevant at this point. You drafted him high, and I understand why you don't want to drop him, and you still start him every week, but he has not been relevant at all. And you got players like Johnny Smith, or like I mentioned, Hunter Henry, who are out there for waivers that have been putting up better points. So I think Jonnu is definitely worth a stash. The last tight end is going to be TJ Hockenson for the Vikings. They're going against the Rams this week, and he's only available in 29% of leagues. So again, his availability will be a little bit tougher, but if he is out there, you should consider grabbing him. He could be back this week, and that right there makes him an instant start. Part of it is because there was a chance they could have played him last week, but they didn't. And that tells me that I think he was close, and he probably could have if it was a playoff game, but I think they really wanted to put him in week 8 because it's going to be the game that I think he's a lot healthier and really could put up that tight end 1 type of performance. So with that said, I do think he's definitely worth a stash. If you haven't already grabbed him, he should have been obviously on your IR earlier in the season because you probably were able to draft him super late. Could end up being a league winner for you this upcoming season because he is such a talent. He's a top 3 tight end who's coming off of an injury that obviously is significant, but I do think he'll come right into this. He might have a week or 2 to adjust, but I think he ends up winning a lot of leagues this season. So those are my week 8 waiver wire videos. It's a lot longer than I normally do, but there were so many things going on this NFL week. I had to put as many players as I felt was worth value. There's probably a lot more, and you can always hit me up in the comments down below if you have questions. And again, week 8 is here. We're getting closer and closer to halfway point of the NFL season. We're also going to that just half point for the fantasy season. So hopefully you guys have had some success. If you guys haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, stay tuned to my start and sit videos, and I'll check you guys out next time.